Before we dive in, before I introduce Fee, and a lot of you have probably seen Fee or know about Fee if you're local, but I just want to set the scene and talk a little bit, just briefly for a couple of minutes, why we're talking about what we're talking about tonight. What's the motivation for this, and why both Fee and myself think this is such an important kind of topic to put out there. So next week we have a brand new 6-week series I know a lot of you heard about, called Soulful Living, which Fee is running, which is being delivered exclusively via the Ayurvedic Mentor, which is our online self-care platform. And it's a really unusual series. It's a very unique series, and it's about looking at kind of the wisdom traditions from all around the world, really, and looking at how can they equip us with a more consciousness-based outlook? How can they support more of a spiritually orientated outlook? And why is that important? Why does it make a difference? And how do we actually do it? How do we, how does it impact upon the way we physically live our lives day to day, rather than being some abstract concept in our mind and in our brain? And I think for Fee and myself and Holly, the reason we wanted to run this course, the reason we wanted to put this course out there, was because ultimately we see such a value in it and such a need for it in people. And I think there's this beautiful Vedic saying, which I think most spiritual traditions and wisdom traditions talk about, which is this question, are we human beings having spiritual experiences, or are we spiritual beings having human experiences? And what I find so interesting is that if we take that out of the culture of spiritualism or Ayurveda or anything like that, and we put it, feet first in Western evidence-based kind of science, if we look at the research around human happiness, human contentment, all of these kinds of things, they place that concept right at the very cornerstone of what they're researching, and in the quest for really unlocking people's happiness and contentment. And I think what that research is showing is that ultimately, without some degree of spirituality in our lives, some degree of consciousness-based, spiritually based outlook, and I'm not talking here about organized religion, it can include organized religion, but it doesn't have to. So we're very clearly delineating that. If we're living without some kind of spiritual orientation, the research shows there's a very clear ceiling on the amount really of happiness and contentment we experience, compared to if that ceiling is blown apart and we have a spiritual outlook towards our life. And in terms of my own personal journey, that's been profound. Having seen it in lots of people, I think it's profound. It's obviously been profound for Fee, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I think it's really important to just begin to tease this apart and just explore this. And we're not talking here about having to shave your head or wear robes. You could do that, wear robes, or have to spend all day chanting or renouncing the world. We're not talking about some abstract, dogmatic, difficult form of spirituality which requires you to pack up your life and move to the Himalayas. What we're talking about is a spiritually embedded outlook that fits right here, right now, in the Western developed world in the 21st century. And how does having that outlook change our life? Because it has the capacity to do that right here, right now, day by day. And that's what I really want to get our teeth into. That's the whole focus of the full 6-week series. If you want to learn more about that, if you can head over to the website. It kicks off next week. You can sign up for only £19.99, which is an absolute bargain for this series, because it comes with loads of information. So with that kind of foundation and background introduced in terms of why we're talking about this tonight, let's welcome Fee to the Mind Body Medical Facebook page. Fee, it's amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. So Fee, I know a lot of you will know Fee. So Fee is the founder of the very influential Earth Monk, which is a lifestyle and clothing-based company. She's a spiritual guide and spiritual counselor. She's had over 4 decades of research and life experience and practice and training in. I hesitant to even call it spirituality, because I know it comes in many guises for you, Fee. Trained in, fully trained in NLP, published author, spiritual guide, just lots and lots of strings to your bow, which makes you perfectly placed to talk through what we're talking through tonight. Obviously, I've had the privilege of knowing you, Fee, for quite a few years now. I know we've had lots of slightly mind-bending kind of eclectic conversations around lots of different areas. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a real privilege. I know we've had a few technical issues, both Fee and I. For everyone watching, both Fee and I are absolute technophobes. You don't mind me saying that, do you, Fee? So it's been a real challenge for both of us to work out how to actually go live today. So thank you for joining us. So I want to dive right in, Fee, with kind of, I think, a question or a discussion or a topic that gets right to the heart of this issue before we look at some specifics, which I think are really relevant. And setting the scene for that question, I think, is this idea that for many people, perhaps most people, our sense of kind of peace and happiness and contentment and joy very often come from outside things, don't they? They come from the house we have, the title we have, our job, our bank balance, our social status. We have all these ego-based labels that give us happiness, or we think give us happiness and contentment. But I think the problem with that, and this is what the research shows, is that it creates a very vulnerable, very fragile state of happiness and contentment, because all of those things can be taken away. We could lose our job, we could lose our house, we could lose our title or our bank balance. So if our happiness and peace and contentment is coming from things outside of us, we're completely vulnerable to those things. Whereas obviously there's another way, which is where we create a sense of happiness and inner peace and calm, which rather than coming from the outside in, comes from the inside out, which I suppose is the promise of the spiritual path in every tradition. But what's your take on that? What is spirituality? What not in India or South America, but right here, right now, what is spirituality, and what benefits does it bring to the table for us living it here now?
I think that's a really huge and very diverse question, and as you have already pointed out, it means very, very different things to each and every one of us, depending on our life journey, our experiences, our culture, our background, our wounds, our childhood. So I would have to answer this from an extremely personal angle. So for me, I think when I was really mulling this down today, it comes down to three things. It comes down to essentially, I think, the word connection. So for me, it's about a connection within me, with myself, with my soul. Some people call that your higher self. Some people call that your true self. It might be your heart or your soul. So for me, it's about that inward journey to oneself and that connection with who we really are beneath all the wounds and all the cracks and all the layers that we've accrued over life, some of which aren't ours. It's also for me, and it doesn't have to be this for other people, but for me, it's very much a connection with the invisible realms, a higher power, something greater than us that exists, an invisible realm, more to this world than meets the eye. And I think as well as that, for me, my spirituality has very much underpinned my journey. It began as belief systems that I was taught, and it began with sitting in meditation every week on a Monday night with my spiritual teacher. But over the years, it's become for me very much the fabric of my being and how I operate and how I live. It's my way of being. And within that, I would use words like trying to be the best that I can, accepting that I'm flawed and I'm learning and I'm here and I'm doing my best. So it's about compassion and tolerance and respect. And gosh, the world needs some more of that.
Yeah, it does right now, that's for sure. Yeah. But that's something that's really interesting, though, because we're going to go off all kinds of tangents here. But there's this idea of something called mirror neurons, which is where where someone's kind, if someone goes around in their day-to-day life with those kinds of attributes you've just described, these things called mirror neurons in our brains begin to reflect that behavior. So as more people go around their day-to-day life being more empathetic, kinder, more loving, more patient, it has this ripple effect where ultimately everyone they come into contact with has that similar experience because of the way these mirror neurons in the brain work. And it's that ripple effect where they say, this kind of spiritual consciousness-based model and why it has the capacity to transform our the way we live our lives and our interpretation of it, that's ultimately what that is, isn't it? It's about us living it, us living those qualities.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lovely line I thought, which was very beautiful, from Jack Cornfield, and he said, help the troubles of the world with a good spirit and a kind and loving heart.
Yeah, which is, what more can you say?
And
I think, and that's the, if I guess if we dig down all the way down to our base motivations, you know, what is it, 7.5, 8 billion people on the planet. What do we all want? I guess there's one universality across us all, which is we want to be happy, don't we? We want to be happy, we want to feel content, we want to feel safe, and that's something that we're all seeking. And I think whilst outside influences can support that, family and having enough money to be safe and all these kind of things, the idea, one of the things that really drew me into this world decades ago was this idea, well, those things are great, but if I can cultivate those same qualities from the inside through it, suddenly it's almost like a superpower. It's transformative because you have this safety blanket that you build within yourself. And I think that's such a key thing. But one of the things, so in the full 6-week course, one of the things you spoke about, which we'll cover in detail, I know, is the ability to see the magic in the everyday. And when you wrote that, it jumped out at me straight away, because I was thinking that's surely what we all need, the ability to go through our mundane, repetitive days and suddenly expose more awe and wonder and magic and excitement. That's like a kind of a lottery win from my perspective. So what does that look like? What is that in real life?
So I think that what I'm noticing in my world and the world of my friends and the people that I talk to and work with is that all our lives are utterly fraught and utterly busy. Many of us have got young kids and older parents. I've got the span of children from 10 to 25. My mum's got dementia, and I am frantically busy. And the to-do list for all of us never gets any smaller. You just strike off a few things and then the list grows some more.
Yeah.
So I think what can happen is we can get, and I'm no saint in this, you know, I have to have moments of remembering myself. And the course writing this has been a really wonderful reminder to get back into some of the roots and some of the things that I've drifted and forgotten about. But for me, it's about the fact that we can get so busy doing that we forget to be, and we forget to own our own happiness, our own well-being, our own joy. And therefore, what can we do when we are really busy and we can't take a morning out, and go to the local woods and pull out a picnic blanket in a nice warm day and sit and read a book and do this beautiful spiritual thing? You know, that's wonderful. And if we can do that, amazing. But for many of us, we can't do that. We've got to fit this kind of well-being into our everyday. So for me, putting the magic back in life is about not only carving out little bits of time, because we do have to do the work. We do have to do a little bit of meditation and a little bit of mindfulness, and we can do other practices that help us. But for me, living in the moment and having magic moments in the everyday is very much about sprinkling small daily joys, small things that bring substance, meaning, remembrance to us. So for me, it's things like, I've got a beautiful quote that I've got written down, and I put it by the side of the kettle, and every single time I boil the kettle, I read this beautiful quote, and I have just a moment of remembering that I am this time-constrained, I'm this timeless being in a time-constrained body. So I put little post-it notes around the house, and some of them just say remember, because I don't want the kids coming up to me going, what's that mean?
True.
Yeah, so I have key words, and sometimes I just put remember, and that to me is a trigger to go, yes, hang on a minute, I'm really caught in today's to-do list, but do you know what? This is a game, and I'm in this journey, and I'm more than this moment. And sometimes just that moment of remembering that this is just another story and another day, and I don't have to attach to it, and I don't have to be it, just reminds me to step back out and not get drawn into the tangles of the day. Or another thing that you can do, which is just as nice, is to have triggers so that when you sit down at your desk, you look outside your window and you look at the clouds. It might be getting up. I've started to set my alarm, courtesy of the Ayurvedic mentor, and get out of bed a little bit earlier. And it's having that time before the world gets busy to have that connection and that moment of stillness, and maybe have some time to journal or write or do gratitude. There's abundance of things that we can do that enable us. There's a lovely quote by a guy called Ken Moji, who says that life's not sustainable without many little joys.
Yeah,
and I love
that's
that.
Great.
And there's lots and lots of ways that we can sprinkle daily life with joys, and that obviously has to be personal. Things that work for me and inspire me might leave other people really cold, but it's taking the time to sometimes sit and think and go, what do I love? Do I love starry nights? Do I love watching the clouds? Do I like hearing the birds? Do I love a decent cup of coffee? Do I like reading? Or can I listen to something? Who do I find inspirational? So there's many, many ways that we can scatter magic into the everyday. And if we do that, we stop getting drawn into this busy hamster wheel that I call it, the spinning hamster wheel. And we create the pauses, we create the gaps, we create the moments of knowing, the moments of remembering that enable us to make the connection. And it's like, I kind of visualize it in my mind like pearls on a necklace. And if we collect across the day lots of little special moments, spending that time when you have a hug with somebody, when your kids come to a hug, instead of being frantic in that moment, spending that time to close them and feel that, putting the phone down and having that dialogue, we can string those moments together to create this beautiful bead necklace. And it's all those moments. Happiness, we're shown happiness wrongly. We're in a society which says you can buy it or you can postpone it and have it when you can afford that beautiful holiday. And we're skewed on what we think happiness is. We associate happiness with big moments, that amazing weekend that we'll have a reunion with the family, that wonderful weekend that we'll have off where we can chill out. And happiness is about those big moments. But happiness really on a real day-to-day level is about lots of smaller joys, lots of small moments of pleasure. I had one yesterday. I took the rubbish out to the bin and I could hear a bird tweeting. And I bothered to put the bin down and I spent a good minute scouring the bones of this tree, trying to find this bird that I could hear this amazing tune from. And I found him in
the end. Found it, did you? Yeah.
And I walked in the house and I just thought, oh, that was lovely. And it's those that create, those linked together on this necklace, create that feeling that today's been a good day. I've enjoyed today.
And that I think that's, for me, that's kind of cut right to the heart of the matter now. Because what more can we say than when we go to bed at night, and whether we've had a busy day or a calm day or a work day or a day off, to be able to go to bed and say that was a good day. That what more can you ask for? Because if every day over 80, 90, 100 years is like that, then you have 8-9 decades of happiness, don't you? And that, I think that concept to me is right at the very heart of this. And actually, I had when we were working, we used to run cancer courses at Crawley Hospital. And I remember I've spoken about this before. Some of you may have heard me say this story before, this example before, but there was a guy there called Nick who had terminal, it was an unknown primary, but he had terminal cancer ultimately. He had no symptoms. He discovered it through a car crash where he had an x-ray for whiplash, didn't know he had it, was given like 4 months to live, a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And he was actually at the time facing bankruptcy in his business. And he was like, I remember talking, we worked with him, he did very well. He died ultimately, which was very, very sad. But in all the chats and discussions I had with him socially and professionally, because we got to know him really well, it was like what you said about hugging your children. He was saying, when you know that probably by this Christmas I won't be here, your kid, after you've been up there 3 times asking you for a drink when you just want to sit down, becomes this magical experience, because you get to see that kid in his bed as an innocent little 8-year-old, knowing that this time next year you won't be able to do that because you'll be gone. All the things in life, like putting the milk, taking the bins out and listening to the bird, or hugging someone. Or he even said, bankruptcy before the cancer diagnosis, bankruptcy was the worst thing he could imagine. But now he said he'd give everything he owns to be bankrupt. They'd live in a tent, but they'd make an adventure out of it. And it was, that was about 7 years ago. And I think about Nick regularly, because there's that sense of, well, I can find the magic in this. This is a crap situation, or this is the worst day, but I can find the magic in that. And if we do that, you can, and was that, who was it? William James said, the greatest discovery of my era is that by changing our attitudes, we change the very nature of our life. And that's got to be what the spiritual kind of journey is all about, isn't it? That empowerment. I think is so key. But then at the same time, one of the other things I think you in the full 6-week course, in the breakdown that you sent us, you made you talk about acceptance, because I think there's a lot of work, isn't there, around manifestation and intention and all of these kinds of things. But if you look at the spiritual traditions, particularly Eastern ones, they focus on you can manifest a future, or you can try and intend or create a new future. But you have to do it from a place of acceptance of where you are right now. And I think what's your take on that? Would you agree with that? Do you see it light?
Yeah, no, I do. I completely agree. I loved the Secret, as Oprah Winfrey said, when that came out. It was everything everybody had always known, but packaged in the most exciting way. Rhonda Byrne's The Secret.
Rhonda Byrne's, yeah.
The thing that I found interesting and slightly disconcerting about it is that it made the universe sound like an Argos catalogue. And you could scroll through the pages and you could randomly manifest. Now, I totally believe that we have infinite capabilities to be able to attract into our life those things that are in alignment and in our best interests to attract. So I could sit here all day. I've got a funny story, actually. I had a friend who said, "Oh, you're a medium, douse the lottery numbers." So I was like, yeah, what a great idea. And she said, "You've never done it?" I said, "No, I've never done it." It took ages, because I had my pendulum and we cut out, obviously, dozens and dozens of numbers. And I got halfway through, and my dad passed a number of years ago. And I have the privilege and pleasure of being able to work with him. And as I was dowsing through, I heard him laugh, and I paused and I just quietly went in. And he said, "Oh, darling, if it was as simple as that."
Yeah, oh, so true.
And and I think that's the issue. Yes, we all have this potentiality that we can tap into to attract. The wonderful thing about the moment that you begin to do any spiritual work at all, and I rediscovered this with great joy over the last couple of weeks, because I've really re-immersed myself into spirituality and thinking and listening to things and reading books. So I've kind of reconnected with it on a different level of intensity than I was previously in January. And when I was looking at all of these things, what's happened at the same time as that, which is in the Celestine prophecy, is all these wonderful coincidences. I was walking to the car and a white feather just completely out of nowhere flew down in front of my eyes. And a question that I was wondering to myself got answered with the person texting me with the answer without me.
No way.
Yeah. And I think the moment you start doing this inquiry and putting your thoughts out there and setting intention, I wonder what my spiritual journey would be like. I wonder what it would be like to connect with my heart. The moment we start doing that, we start to have beautiful, magical gifts from the universe that comes. But the thing with manifesting is that it has to be in alignment with what we're really here to do, and our soul, and in my belief system, our soul's journey. So I can sit here and want to be a multimillionaire because I could do really good things with it all day. But if that's not what's part of my plan to be here and, what the universe would like me to do, I don't think that's the service that is meant for me. But lucky to the people who have that.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a fine line between manifesting and accepting and going with the flow. So to answer your question, I think accepting falls into two parts. I think there's self-acceptance, and very, very many of us have a very dodgy relationship with ourselves, where we are unkind and uncompassionate about ourselves. But there's also acceptance within the spiritual context of, I am fighting what is. And I think that's the nub of acceptance in a spiritual way. We can get, there's a great line that my NLP coach, I was trying to do an exercise and he came up and he squeezed me on the shoulder and he said, Fee, you're really in your own way.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God. And I said to him, Tim, I'm in my own way all the time. And he went, yeah, we all are. And
it's the human condition, isn't it?
Yeah. And sometimes I literally say to myself, like you with your story with Nick, was it?
Yeah.
I think to myself, you're in your own way. Get out of your own way. And I think that we need to remember that what we resist persists.
Yeah.
So if we are in conflict with how it is, whether that's a person, a situation, with work, and you can't affect change on it, you can only affect change in you.
Yeah.
I can't make someone be nicer and kinder to me. I can't make someone else get it when they don't. I can't change the chaos in the world, but I can change me. I can do my bit. So I think that, to answer your question, acceptance for me is all about recognizing when I'm in a situation where I cannot affect any change apart from my attitude. And at that point, I go, right, I surrender to this. And I think that we've all had those moments where we've been wrestling with something, someone, an experience, a moment, an activity, something that happened, something that someone said to us, and we're fighting it, and we're chewing it, and we're worrying, and we can't put it down, and we're doing the classic thing, what we resist persists. And the moment that we go, do you know what? I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm putting it down, or I'm letting it go, or get lost. I can't be bothered. The moment we do that, we energetically shift our exchange with that condition.
Yeah.
And we go into flow.
Yeah.
And I think that's the art of acceptance. It's flowing with how it is, taking full responsibility for our own choices, knowing that we can only change ourselves. But it's also about having healthy boundaries, going with the flow and accepting what is, and knowing when to surrender. Most certainly is not about being a doormat or being a wimp or not being accountable. It's actually being very clear in your personal accountability and identifying that you are caught in a loop. And actually the most freeing and liberating choice that you can make as an individual is to surrender and release.
Yeah.
And when we do that, magic happens.
But again, you could look at global examples. I think one of the things we hear a lot in the different courses we do is, well, you're going to become the doormat, you're going to become the weak link, you're going to get walked all over. But then look at before Gandhi, look at all the uprisings that tried to overthrow the Raj. They all failed. Gandhi comes along with the complete opposite way, and that I'm going to himsa, complete non-violence. Yeah. Overthrew the Raj in a very short period of time. And that's that sense of it. It's staying true to your morals and your ethics and your beliefs, but doing it in a non-violent but very, very passionate way. And I think we can that applies to. And actually, I think for me, Holly and I were talking about this yesterday, and we were saying, well, we're talking about the 6-week course and spirituality, and we were thinking, well, how does a spiritually orientated outlook affect our day-to-day lives as individuals? Yeah. In a tangible way? And I was thinking about that, mulling over it actually on a bike ride, and I was thinking, for me, the concept of effortlessness is right up there. Because if I go back, a couple of decades when you're younger and there's more going on, and you maybe don't have as much time for that, the spiritual side of things, life felt harder. It felt like there was much more blood, sweat and tears, much more pushing things uphill all the time to get what I wanted or what I wanted to achieve or goals or things. Whereas now I kind of had that sense of, and I guess you learn over time where that line is, but it's a sense of, I've got this idea, I really want to reach, bring it to fruition because I think it will serve and help people, and giving it your best shot. But you get to a point where you just know it's not going to work. And rather than just pushing, fighting, it's that sense of this isn't meant to be. Fighting against this is kind of fighting against the very weight of the universe. It's not giving up. It's just changing tack. And then it so often it leads you down a better path that you could never have foreseen. And I can think in the last, even since lockdown, I can think of quite a few, like around 4 or 5 examples where that's played out and the outcomes have been so much better than what I originally wanted for the original plan. And I think most people, we can't see the dots, can we? We can't see the joy.
No,
and
no.
I'm sure everyone, we've got 40, 45 people listening to this, and us too. I bet everyone listening to this has got an example of something which at the time was an absolute disaster, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, 10 years later, without that, they wouldn't have got something infinitely better as a result of it. I'm sure everyone's got examples.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a famous saying that goes along the lines that sometimes not getting what you want was the biggest stroke of luck.
Yeah, that's exactly that. And it is, isn't it? But you have to, but I think when things go wrong, Western materialistic mindset that we were educated in, it creates turmoil, it creates stress, it sleepless nights. Whereas if we approach the situation with kind of a little bit more conscious, a little bit more spiritually orientated, we're in the same situation but with turmoil, and that's something, because key. Can you hear me, Fee? Is the connection okay?
No, I just lost you a little bit in and out then, but I think I got the.
Am I back?
Yes, you are now. I think I got the gist.
Got the gist.
Yeah.
So in the in the 6-week series, you talk about this awakening to a more spiritual life, or awakening to a more conscious life, and that was something that obviously I've cherry picked sentences here, the ones that really jumped out at me. And this awakening, that really jumped out at me because I think whether we know it or not, I think most people, and the science supports this, actually, the Western science supports this, that most people have a yearning for delving into something more. And that could be, nature, it could be spirituality, it could be God, it could be Buddhism, it could be a million and one things, but whether that's conscious or subconscious. And I think awakening for me is the kind of the adjective, I suppose, that describes that idea that, what am I doing? What's going on? And what does that mean in terms of practical, spirituality or consciousness? What do you mean by that?
I think that I mean the calling.
The calling.
I think you nailed it. I think that awakening is that kind of, and people might already be on that journey. I tried to phrase it in a way that allowed it to be an ongoing journey, because I think the spiritual path, the more rungs you climb, the more you realize there's further to climb. There isn't an end point. So I recognize, and I'd like to honor the people that are listening to this who have walked this path. My spiritual teacher used to say, it's the hardest path up the mountain, but it'll give you the best views. So to me, awakening is that gentle kind of calling, that curiosity, that wonderment, is there more to life than this? That desire to have more of a mind, body, spirit connection. It's what's drawn people to come to the Ayurvedic mentorship program. A curiosity. I'd like to live more congruently with the wonders of the natural world and the medicines that are out there, and I'd like to have your wisdom. And so I think awakening to your spirituality, awakening to a more conscious way of living, is just that gentle. I think the picture that I get is, and it's a lotus, is this very gentle opening and peeling back of the petals to what it means for us as individuals. I really do think that. My spiritual teacher used to say to me that everybody comes down to earth and they're their own train driver. So they have a lovely little cab and it's got the power in that bit. I used to visualize that as the stove with the coal, and we can stoke it up and we can get going on our little train track, and we can spend our entire life very comfortably, and some people very, very happily, from our first breath to our last breath, in our little cab of our train, going along our track, totally accepting life for exactly what it is. The physicality, the material aspects of it, the eating, the sleeping, with no wonderment, no curiosity.
Yeah.
And that suits them fine. But she used to say to me, the spiritual part is you choose to hook a carriage to the back end of your train.
Yeah.
And you can go and you can attach that, or you can choose not to attach it. And she used to say, sometimes when life gets very, very busy, the world of spirit and your own innate spirituality knows that sometimes when we get too chaotic, that bit has to go quiet.
Yeah.
So sometimes when life's really difficult and we're in the maelstrom, we can't be super spiritual. Ideally, we can draw on our tools and techniques, but sometimes that world has to quietly settle back a bit to allow us to survive.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we can pull it in when the moment's right. So for me, awakening to our spirituality is this, and people have already begun it, or for those people who are curious in starting it, for me, the metaphor that I get is this beautiful lotus flower opening up with curiosity and wonderment and questions, and it begins in a journey with ourself. I think that it's the door, it's the most important relationship we'll ever have is the one we have with ourselves.
Yeah. But
so to me, it's that.
But it's so interesting that you make the analogy or the metaphor of the lotus flower, because the lotus flower is the symbol of the whole of Ayurveda, the whole.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, the symbol. And the reason they chose that is because obviously it spends its whole life in water, but never gets wet. So if you look at the lotus flowers, it's 100% repellent to water. So the concept in Ayurveda and the Vedantic tradition is that we spend our whole life in the chaos of earth, with all of the stress and strain and problems and turmoil. But if we can be in that world and not get wet, if we can be in this world but be detached from it by having an inner dialogue where we see things and we perceive things and we react to things, and we from a more consciousness-based outlook, we're like the lotus flower who's in the water and never gets wet. We're in the world, but
I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
So we're not, so when you said that, it struck me straight away as like just that synergy there. So which I think is a great analogy, this idea of living in the world but not getting wedded by it. It's just,
it's beautiful. And the other thing that I love about the lotus flower is the phrase "no mud, no lotus," because so often the things that have, unfortunately for us as human beings, we tend to learn the most not when we're happy and we're skipping and life's brilliant. We learn the most when we're in hardship, mental, emotional, physical turmoil. That's when when we're up against it, that's when we really discover. Sometimes we learn what we want by experiencing what we don't want, and what we like by experiencing what isn't working for us and is making us unhappy. And we learn so much from our trials and tribulations. And what I love about the lotus flower is that the lotus flower is always attached to the mud at the bottom of the pond.
Yeah.
That sludgy, filthy, gunky thing. And for most of us, we get to a point where we go, oh, I don't want to ever go back to that horrible time in my life. And yet actually what the lotus flower, I think, teaches us, and which we should try more to honor, is that although we might feel ashamed or embarrassed or sad or full of grief and loss over something that's in the mud, it's okay to say, that helped me bring me where I am now. Yeah. That was my journey. And just like the lotus flower, I can now be in the sunshine of a new day and awakening to all my spiritual potential and discovering this life and trying to experience life with no water and not being in the pond. Yeah. But you are nevertheless still rooted in that history, and it's okay to be at peace with that history. Yeah, acceptance again. Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you start speaking to people, spiritual guides or people that come from long lineages of spirituality, whether irrespective of the camp,
I think they radiate, which is why why do certain yogis gather such status. Yeah. They've got millions of followers, and not for financial gain. They live in avowed poverty, but it's because the way they live their lives and the energy they create is so palpable, because they're living this, and obviously we can't all get to that level in the same way we can all play football, but we can't all become Ronaldo.
Yeah.
But I think I guess the motivation for me for the series and this kind of work and is there's a way of living where we have more joy, more happiness, more peace, more contentment, more abundance, not through changing our world, not through changing the size of our house, or not by changing anything other than the inner dialogue. And I just feel it'd be such a waste if people go through their lives, that you can go through your whole life perfectly happy without that, like you said.
Yes.
But there's another level, and I think unlocking that just brings so much more empowerment and autonomy and joy into our lives. And I think that's such a beautiful way to live. And I couldn't imagine kind of being without it. I wouldn't want to be without it, but I think it's so just to put you on the spot now, Fee, so people listening, what's kind of one thing that, say someone's listening to this, they've got no background in meditation, no spiritual background, no exposure whatsoever until this hour, this day, what's one thing you can do right off the bat, other than follow Earth Monk, that can help you kind of move onto that trajectory of being more conscious, more spiritually aware?
Okay, so let's try this. It's your breath.
Good answer.
We breathe every day, so why don't we just spend a moment and just experience that? Because if I had a penny for every time in my life that people had said to me, I can't meditate and I can't do mindfulness, and I think it's because people don't really appreciate all the different variations and flavors that can be. So let's do something with our breath, and then everybody at home who's might have got bored listening to us can have a moment of connection, because I said to you at the beginning, for me, my spirituality is about my connection with within, and my connection with my belief in a higher source. I don't care. It doesn't matter what you conceive that to be. It doesn't matter. And you don't have to connect it. It could just be your desire to connect within. That's fine. But for me, it creates depth and meaning and purpose. And that's what gives us the rich textures in life. So what I'll ask everybody to do is to just close their eyes and just notice your body for a second. I'm going to ask you to close your mouths. And I'm just going to ask you just for a second to just breathe really gently through your nose. And just allow that flow of air to just come in, into your body and out. The rise and fall of your chest. And you might notice a stillness and a quietness that's descended around you or in you. And with eyes of compassion, imagining what it would be like to have eyes of compassion, to just peer down onto our shining light in our hearts. And as we breathe in, we can imagine that our breath makes that light burn that bit brighter, glow that bit brighter. And so with every breath, with eyes of compassion and acceptance for everything that we are, perfectly imperfect, we just hold our hearts in this beautiful sense of compassion and light and love. And when you're ready, open your eyes again.
And that's what it needs to be, isn't it? Just even in a manic, hectic day where you're working, 18 hours, anyone can find just a minute just to reconnect, re-engage, and then go again, can't they? And I think that's got to be the power of this. And I think
So the most important thing that you can do if you just did one thing is to know that through your breath you can connect with your entire body, mind, body, and spirit. We live in our heads and we become very disconnected from our entire being, and we are mind, body, and spirit. And the breath is the quickest way that we can connect with our center. And if all you did for the rest of your life was spend a minute in the shower, a minute when the kettle was boiling, even when you were on the loo having a wee, it doesn't matter. If you just spent a few moments every day just stilling yourself down, breathing very gently, noticing that flow of air, you can add in a visualization, you can leave the visualization out, but just using your breath, you can really transform your day-to-day experience. And you can use your breath when somebody winds you up and gets you irritated. You can use your breath when you're at the traffic lights and it goes to red and you think, I really, really need to get to work, or I'm late. Use your breath. Just breathe. Let it go. You're stuck. Use your breath.
It's probably the only, if you look at all, we'll wrap up now, but every spiritual discipline, from niche indigenous spirituality to the bigger religions and everything in between, I think the focus on the breath is probably the only commonality from what I've studied and read from them all. Whether you're looking at sub-Saharan tribes, they talk about the breath, Aboriginal tribes, Hinduism, Desert Fathers, Christianity, they all have this singular focus that the breath is the way in, and it works, so it makes sense to focus on that. So okay, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Fee. We're super grateful that you've done that. So if, like I said, we've obviously got a whole 6-week series kicking off next week, the 17th, I think. So if anyone would like kind of to take part in that designated Facebook group and loads of support and resources, then do check out the website and the Ayurvedic Mentor. But other than that, have a lovely, lovely, lovely evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Fee. And I will see you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, everybody.